This is a true story, something that happened in my own life, and even now, telling it feels like pulling a shard of glass from an old wound. The weight of my father's legacy felt condensed into the single, heavy Mont Blanc pen resting beside the leather-bound folder on the polished mahogany table. We were at the McNinch House, a ridiculously opulent restaurant in Charlotte reserved for milestones, and this was supposed to be the biggest of them all. The night my father, Robert Vance, announced his retirement as CEO of Vance Innovations. My brother, Ethan, raised his champagne flute, the crystal catching the light, and his eyes met mine across the table, a glint of smug triumph in them that made the blood in my veins turn to ice. He already knew. He knew the words my father was about to say were going to shatter my entire world. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. My entire life had been a 28-year apprenticeship for a job I was never going to get. Vance Innovations wasn't just a company to me. It was the backdrop of every childhood memory. It was the smell of sawdust and blueprints in Dad's home office, the thrill of visiting a construction site in a tiny hard hat, the quiet pride of watching a skyscraper rise from the ground knowing our family had sourced every single beam, every pane of glass, every yard of wire that gave it life. We were in architectural logistics, the unglamorous but essential backbone of Charlotte's booming skyline. Dad built it from nothing, on a foundation of handshakes, integrity, and an obsessive attention to detail. I inherited the obsession. Ethan inherited the charm. While he was the president of his fraternity at UNC Chapel Hill, I was spending my summers learning our inventory system. While he was closing deals on the golf course with a slick smile and a firm handshake, I was in the trenches, creating the proprietary logistics software that cut our delivery times by 30% and became our single biggest competitive advantage. I knew our clients not just by their company names, but by the names of their kids, their favorite lunch spots, the specific construction challenges their last 3 projects had faced. I lived and breathed the business. Dad always said, "Clara, you've got my head for the details. You're the engine of this place." Ethan, he'd say, was the face. "Every company needs a good face," he'd chuckle. The assumption, unspoken but understood for a decade, was that I was the heir apparent. I was the one who pulled all-nighters, the one who caught the multi-million-dollar invoicing error, the one who flew to Seattle on Christmas Eve to personally oversee an emergency shipment for our biggest client, the Sterling Group. Ethan brought in new accounts, sure, but I was the one who kept them. The engine. I had a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, all meticulously mapped out, ready to take the reins and honor our father's legacy while pushing us into the future. Dad had seen the presentations. He'd praised them, his eyes gleaming with pride. "This is brilliant, Clara. Just brilliant." So when he cleared his throat that night at the restaurant, the small, intimate dinner party of board members and their spouses falling silent, I felt a nervous flutter of excitement. This was it. This was the moment. My chair felt unsteady beneath me, my palms slick with sweat. "As you all know," Dad began, his voice thick with emotion, "Vance Innovations has been my life's work. But it's time for a new generation to take the lead." He paused, looking first at me, then at Ethan. He opened the leather folder. "It takes a certain kind of vision to navigate the future. A bold, aggressive vision. It takes a leader who isn't afraid to take risks, to be the face of progress." Every word was a small, sharp blow. Bold. Aggressive. Face. These weren't the words he used for me. These were his words for Ethan. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I looked at Ethan again. His smile was predatory now. He wasn't even trying to hide it. He was savoring this, my public execution. "And that is why," my father continued, his voice ringing with a conviction that broke me, "I am incredibly proud to announce the new CEO of Vance Innovations, my son Ethan Vance." The room erupted in applause. It sounded like static, like the ocean roaring in my ears. I saw my father reach across the table and shake Ethan's hand. I saw Ethan stand up, beaming, accepting the congratulations, his hand on Dad's shoulder. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me, some pitiful, some curious, all of them burning into my skin. They all knew. They all knew this was supposed to be my role. My humiliation was a spectator sport. I just sat there, frozen, a polite, meaningless smile plastered on my face while my insides curdled into a cold, hard knot of betrayal. My own father had just gutted me in front of the entire world and handed the knife to my brother to twist. The engine had just been told it was being scrapped for a flashier hood ornament. The days that followed were a blur of forced smiles and hollow condolences. People would stop me in the hallway, their faces a mask of practiced sympathy. "Tough break, Clara," one of the senior project managers said, patting my shoulder. "We were all rooting for you." It was meant to be kind, but it felt like salt in a gaping wound. Ethan, in his infinite generosity, gave me a new title: Chief Innovation Officer. It was a meaningless, insulting placation. My office was moved from the executive floor down to a glass-walled box on the main operations floor. "So you can be closer to the team," Ethan explained with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. My real role was to be a living trophy of his victory, a constant reminder to everyone of who was in charge. My projects were reassigned. My team was dismantled and absorbed into his new synergy task force. I was left with a staff of one intern and a portfolio of long-term strategic explorations, which was corporate speak for ideas we will never, ever implement. The betrayal gnawed at me, but it was the confusion that kept me up at night. How could my father, the man who taught me the business, who praised my work ethic and my vision, have made such a drastic, inexplicable choice? He avoided me, citing endless meetings with Ethan about the transition. When I did manage to corner him, he was flustered, defensive. "Clara, the board felt Ethan had the public profile we need right now. It was a business decision, not a personal one. Don't be so sensitive." Sensitive. The word was a dismissal, a way to invalidate the years of dedication I had poured into his company. But I knew it was more than that. Something was wrong. This wasn't just a bad decision, it felt like a conspiracy. So I started digging. My access levels in the company network had been downgraded, but I had built the dam system. I knew the back doors. Late one night, long after the cleaning crews had gone home, I sat in my silent, glass-walled prison and dove into the server archives. It started with the expense reports. Ethan's were astronomical. Dinners at the Capitol Grill, courtside Hornets tickets. Client meetings at exclusive golf resorts in Pinehurst. All filed under business development. But when I cross-referenced the dates with our client roster, there were no corresponding projects, no new accounts. He was just living large on the company dime. That was sloppy, but it wasn't the smoking gun. Then I found the emails. A chain between Ethan and two board members he had personally brought on board the year before, his old fraternity brothers. They were discussing me. Months before the announcement, Ethan was poisoning the well. "Clara's approach is too conservative," one email read. "She's risk-averse. We need to be lean and aggressive to grow." Another one from Ethan himself. "I'm handling Dad. He's old school, but he'll see that my vision is what's best for the company's future value. Clara is operations, not leadership. She can't close. She's stuck in the weeds." He had been actively campaigning against me, painting my meticulous, profitable management as a weakness. He'd framed my stability as stagnation, my diligence as a lack of vision. He'd been feeding this narrative to my father, preying on Dad's fear of becoming obsolete. He hadn't just accepted the crown. He had methodically, secretly stolen it. The real dagger, though, was in the financial projections. I found a separate folder on a hidden partition of the marketing server. It was a set of financials Ethan had prepared specifically for my father. He had manipulated the data. He'd inflated the revenue projections for the clients he'd brought in, while simultaneously attributing rising operational costs he had created with his lavish spending, to the departments I managed. He'd created a fantasy world on paper where he was the rainmaker and I was the cautious, inefficient drain on resources. It was a masterpiece of corporate gaslighting. He had shown my father a carefully constructed lie, and my father, wanting to believe his son was a prodigy, had bought it completely. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating the stark reality. The air in my lungs felt thin. It wasn't just that I'd been passed over. I had been sabotaged. My brother, my own flesh and blood, had systematically dismantled my reputation and defrauded our father to seize power. The knot of betrayal in my gut hardened into something cold, sharp, and heavy. It was rage. Pure, unadulterated rage. And in that moment, in the silence of the office I had helped build, I made a decision. He thought I was stuck in the weeds. Fine. I would show him what could grow there. Ethan's reign as CEO began with a series of sweeping changes that were as arrogant as they were foolish. He unveiled a new company logo, a sharp, sterile, generic swoosh that erased the sturdy, dependable oak tree that had been our symbol for 40 years. He spent a fortune on a lavish office renovation, replacing Dad's warm mahogany with cold chrome and glass. He called it Project Phoenix, as if the company needed to be reborn from the ashes of my father's and my supposedly mediocre tenure. He held a company-wide town hall in the newly renovated atrium. Standing on a small stage under a spotlight, he looked less like a CEO and more like a tech guru giving a keynote. "The era of playing it safe is over," he declared, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "We are no longer just a logistics company. We are disruptors. We are innovators." The buzzwords flowed like cheap champagne. Synergy, optimization, vertical integration, paradigm shift. He announced the company was pivoting to a tech-first model, investing heavily in an untested AI platform that promised to automate client relations. He was, in essence, trying to eliminate the very thing that made us successful: the human element, the personal relationships I had spent years cultivating. My new role as Chief Innovation Officer became my prison. Ethan would call me into meetings with his new executive team, a collection of slick, backslapping yes-men, and perform a little show. "Let's see what our innovator has for us," he'd say with a smirk. "Clara, any thoughts on disrupting the supply chain paradigm?" I would offer a carefully considered idea, a new efficiency protocol, a partnership with a sustainable materials supplier, and he would listen with performative patience before dismissing it. "Interesting," he'd say, a euphemism for stupid, but a little tactical. "We're thinking bigger picture here. We're thinking about the 10,000-foot view." He made me feel small, my practical, profitable knowledge a relic of a bygone era. He had all the power, backed by our father and the board. He was untouchable, wrapped in a veneer of visionary leadership, while he was actively dismantling our father's life's work. The final, unforgivable straw came about 3 months into his tenure. We lost the McGregor account. It wasn't our biggest client, but they had been with us for 20 years. They were family. I had personally overseen their last project, a boutique hotel in uptown Charlotte. Mr. McGregor was old school. He valued a phone call, a person he could trust. Ethan's new automated system had messed up a critical shipment of custom Italian marble, and when Mr. McGregor called to complain, he was routed through a call center and told to submit a ticket. In the emergency board meeting that followed, Ethan didn't even flinch. He stood in front of a PowerPoint slide deck and blamed the loss on legacy system failures. "The old way of doing things is costing us," he said, looking directly at me. Clara's protocols were too rigid. They weren't agile enough to interface with the new platform. The lie was so audacious, so breathtakingly dishonest, that I couldn't stay silent. "That's not true," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "We lost the McGregor account because your system failed and no one was there to pick up the phone. You took the relationship out of client relationship." Ethan's smile was a thin, cruel line. He took a slow step towards me, lowering his voice for dramatic effect. "You see, this is what I'm talking about. This is the kind of thinking that holds us back." He turned to the board. "She's sentimental. In this business, you need a killer instinct. You have to be willing to break things to build something better." He turned back to me, his eyes cold and final. "You just don't have it, sis. This is my company now. You can either get with the program, or you can get out of the way." The room was silent. My father, sitting at the head of the table, looked down at his hands, refusing to meet my gaze. He was a coward, trapped in the web of lies my brother had spun. In that moment, watching Ethan preen in his stolen glory, I felt something shift inside me. The grief and the shock finally burned away, leaving behind a core of pure, unyielding steel. My resolve. He wanted a killer? Fine. He was about to meet one. I walked back to my glass box, my heels clicking a steady, determined rhythm on the polished concrete floor. I didn't pack a box. I didn't make a scene. I simply sat down, wrote a 2-sentence resignation letter, and emailed it to Ethan and my father. Then I took my purse, walked out of the building without looking back, and never returned. My war began not with a bang, but with a quiet, calculated transaction. I sold the block of company stock my grandmother had left me. It wasn't a controlling interest, but it was enough. I liquidated everything, my savings, my 401k, and pooled it all into a single business account. The number on the screen was both terrifying and liberating. It was the seed of my revenge. I named my new company Apex Design Solutions. It was a declaration of intent. We wouldn't just be a service, we would be the pinnacle. My first office was a small, rented desk at a WeWork space in the Noda Arts District, surrounded by aspiring graphic designers and app developers. It was a humbling step down from the executive suite at Vance Innovations, but it was mine. My first phone call was to Marcus, a brilliant, 60-year-old logistics manager my father had hired 30 years ago. He was a walking encyclopedia of every project we'd ever done. Ethan had phased him into early retirement a month after taking over, calling him redundant. Marcus answered on the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd call," he said, his voice warm and steady. "What's the plan, boss?" He joined me the next day. Together, we were a 2-person army. We had no infrastructure, no fancy software, no reputation. But we had something Ethan had thrown away: institutional knowledge. We knew every client, every supplier, every city inspector, every potential bottleneck in the entire state of North Carolina. We didn't go after Ethan's new clients. We went after our father's old ones. The ones who, like Mr. McGregor, valued integrity and a personal touch. Our strategy was simple and devastatingly effective. Ethan was selling them a high-tech, automated, impersonal future. We were offering them a bespoke, high-touch, reliable present. Our first target was a mid-sized construction firm, Caldwell Builders. They had been complaining for months about Vance's new, inflexible scheduling system. I didn't just call the CEO, David Caldwell. I showed up at one of his job sites at 6 a.m. with 2 coffees and a set of blueprints. "David," I said, handing him a coffee, "I know your current concrete pour is scheduled for Thursday. I also know there's a 90% chance of thunderstorms. My dad's rule was to always check the Farmer's Almanac, not just the weather app. I can get your supplier to move it to Wednesday morning. It'll cost you a little more on overtime for the crew, but it'll save you a fortune in potential delays." He looked at me, then at the sky, then at the flimsy proposal from Vance Innovations in his hand. "Ethan never would have thought of that," he said. We had the Caldwell account by noon. It was a small victory, but it was a start. We repeated the process, client by client. We worked 18-hour days, fueled by coffee and a righteous fury. Marcus handled the logistics, calling in decades of favors from suppliers. I was the face, the strategist, the closer. I used my intimate knowledge of their projects to anticipate their needs before they even knew they had them. I was relentless. Ethan heard about my new venture, of course. At first, he was dismissive. A source inside Vance told me he'd laughed about it in a meeting. "My sister is playing business in a sandbox," he'd scoffed. "It's cute." His amusement turned to annoyance when we poached our third client. He started playing dirty. He called our suppliers and threatened to pull Vance's multi-million-dollar contracts if they worked with Apex. Some caved, but others, loyal to my father's memory and disgusted by Ethan's arrogance, secretly worked with us, feeding us information and giving us priority service. Ethan's attempt to blacklist us backfired. It only strengthened our allies' resolve. The war escalated. We were in a silent, brutal battle for the soul of Charlotte's construction industry. Every client we won was a direct blow to Vance's bottom line, and more importantly to Ethan's ego. He was so focused on his grand, disruptive vision that he didn't see the foundation crumbling beneath him. He was selling a story about the future, while I was solving my client's problems today. The tipping point, the ultimate prize, was always going to be the Sterling Group. They were our father's first major client, the account that had put Vance Innovations on the map. They were more than a client, they were a legacy. Sterling was planning their most ambitious project ever. The Sterling Tower, a 60-story skyscraper that would redefine the Charlotte skyline. The logistics contract alone was worth more than Vance's entire previous year's revenue. To win it would be validation. To lose it would be a death blow for whichever company came in second. This was the final battle. The Sterling Tower was the talk of the city. Securing that contract wasn't just business, it was a coronation. Ethan was supremely confident. He saw it as his birthright, the jewel in his new crown. He wined and dined the Sterling executives, promising them cutting-edge drone delivery and AI-powered inventory management. He was selling them the future. I knew I couldn't compete on flash. I had to compete on substance. I called Eleanor Vance, the CEO of the Sterling Group. She was a formidable, no-nonsense woman who had inherited the company from her own father, just as Ethan and I had. She agreed to give me a meeting, more out of courtesy for my father than anything else. My presentation was the culmination of everything I believed in. I didn't have a flashy PowerPoint. I brought a single, meticulously detailed binder. I didn't talk about AI or synergy. I talked about contingency plans for hurricanes. I talked about sourcing rare reclaimed wood from a specific mill in Asheville I knew she loved. I showed her a critical path analysis that identified 22 potential failure points in her current plan and a detailed solution for every single one. I showed her that I hadn't just read her RFP, I had lived inside it. Ethan is promising you the building of tomorrow, I said in closing, my voice even and sure. I'm promising you that the building will actually get built, on time and on budget, without a single headline-making mistake. He's selling you a dream. I'm selling you a guarantee. Eleanor listened, her face unreadable. She thumbed through my binder, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Your father built his company on guarantees, Clara, she said quietly. Thank you for your time. The next 2 weeks were agonizing. The entire city held its breath. The business journals ran stories comparing the two bids. Vance versus Vance, a family feud for the skyline. Ethan was everywhere, giving interviews, oozing confidence. I stayed silent, working, planning for either outcome. The call came on a Tuesday. It was Eleanor's assistant. Ms. Vance would like to see you. This afternoon. I walked into the Sterling Group's boardroom, my heart hammering. Ethan was already there, a smug, triumphant look on his face. My father was with him. Seeing him sitting beside my brother, a united front, felt like a fresh betrayal. Eleanor walked in and sat at the head of the table. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. We've made our decision, she said, her gaze sweeping over all of us. She looked at Ethan. Ethan, your presentation was impressive. Your vision for the future of logistics is compelling. Ethan's smile widened. He shot me a triumphant glance. However, Eleanor continued, her eyes now locking onto mine, a building of this magnitude isn't about vision. It's about execution. It's about mitigating risk. It's about trust. She slid a thick contract across the table towards me. The Sterling Tower contract is awarded to Apex Design Solutions, she announced. Clara, your proposal was one of the most thorough and brilliant I have ever seen. Your father would be proud. The silence in the room was absolute. Ethan's face went white, the smugness collapsing into disbelief, then pure, undiluted fury. He stared at Eleanor, then at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. My father looked stunned, his eyes wide. He looked from the contract on the table to my face, and for the first time, I think he finally saw me. Not as his sensitive daughter, but as the leader I had always been. The pride Eleanor mentioned was a ghost on his face, quickly replaced by the dawning horror of what he had done. I calmly took the contract, my hands not shaking, and slid it into my briefcase. Thank you, Eleanor, I said, my voice steady. We won't let you down. I stood up, nodded to them all, and walked out of the room. I didn't need to see the aftermath. I had won. The war was over. The news hit the business wire within the hour. Vance Innovations' stock, which had already been struggling under Ethan's mismanagement, cratered. His visionary leadership was exposed as a hollow facade. He had the face, but I had the foundation. And a house built on a weak foundation will always, eventually fall. 6 months later, I stood in my new office on the 45th floor of a building in Uptown. Below me, the massive construction site for the Sterling Tower was buzzing with activity, a testament to my victory. Apex Design Solutions had more than tripled in size. We were the new titans of the industry. Vance Innovations, on the other hand, had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy the week before. My father had called me, his voice a broken whisper, asking if I would consider buying the assets, absorbing what was left of his legacy into mine. I told him I'd think about it. The engine had outlasted the hood ornament. My revenge was complete, precise, and absolute. But as I stared out at the city I now helped to build, at the tangible proof of my triumph, the only thing I could feel was the profound, echoing silence of winning a war you never wanted to fight. The end.